So there are a lot of FNAF characters. Around 1,400 to be exact. Yeah, full credit to Johnny the Night Guard and everyone involved in that video for figuring the number out. I mean, seriously, if you haven't seen that video by Johnny the Night Guard, please go support their channel. That video is a ton of fun to watch. That number they found is from every single piece of FNAF media that exists. That includes all the games, all the books, and all the unique characters from the movies. And every single one of these characters has a unique name and design. For the most part. A good portion of these characters are just variations of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. I mean, you've got your classics, the Wizards, the Nightmares, the Toys, the Phantoms, the list goes on. Literally. But while I was looking at all the names, there were a few characters that stuck out to me. These characters have some of the most iconic names in the franchise, and I was trying to figure out why. So I'm here today to talk about the names of FNAF characters that we as a community actually came up with. Now, before I start yapping, there are a few things I want to say. There are characters on this list that have more canon names now, but for a long time there were some characters that were referred to by the name that we as a community gave them, and for some, Scott even stuck with them. Also, I will be using a lot of Markiplier's video as reference to where we got some of the names, as he was, for a lot of people, the kind of front-runner of FNAF content and theories when the game was coming out. I'll talk more about this once I get to the specific character, but for now, let's start with our first character on this list from Five Nights at Freddy's 1.
11% and it's 5 a.m. I don't know if I'm gonna make it. Oh, please don't get me Freddy. Please don't get me Freddy. Come on. Is this what it takes to get views on YouTube?
Uh-oh.
Golden Freddy makes his debut in the first game through a rare Easter egg in which the poster in Cam 2B changes to his face, and then he appears in your office when you flip the camera down. This is a 1 in 100,000 chance of happening. If you don't flip your cams back up quick enough, he gets you. The original name for this character in the game files is actually just Yellow Bear, and whether or not this was a placeholder name that Scott came up with, nobody really knew about it. However, after Markiplier's second video on the series, he encountered the rare Easter egg, and, well, the rest is history.
See you on the flip side.
Oh god! What the f-
Markiplier named his video, "Was That Golden Freddy?" The name stuck, and everyone was calling this weirdly yellow version of Freddy Golden Freddy. I mean, once FNAF 2 came out, you could see that Scott even stuck with the name as well. Things do start to get confusing, though, once FNAF 3 and FNAF 4 come out, because we start to see versions of this character that aren't necessarily Golden Freddy, but rather Fredbear, which is another yellow bear animatronic. It's pretty confusing whether or not Golden Freddy and Fredbear are the same character. Lore-wise, they probably are, but Scott names them separately in his games, so unsure. Fredbear is actually mentioned in a FNAF 2 phone call on Night 5, but the name doesn't come back until FNAF 4. Regardless, it's pretty cool that Scott kept this name for the rest of the series. I don't know if he ever planned on using the name Yellow Bear again, but considering Spring Bonnie in the FNAF movies is referred to as the Yellow Rabbit, it's possible that Yellow Bear would have been his name if not for Markiplier and the rest of the fanbase. I really do wonder what his name would be if Markiplier never encountered that rare Easter egg.
Okay.
Next up, we have Phone Guy. This one kinda speaks for itself. You know, he's a guy that talks to you through the phone. Not the most creative name, but hey, ironically, it's super memorable. Phone Guy's introduction was in the first game as well, and he acts as sort of an in-game tutorial in which he tells you about all the different animatronic threats you'll be facing, as well as how to deal with them. On Night 4, he dies, and after that, he's brought back from the dead prequel fashion in FNAF 2. In FNAF 3, he also makes an appearance, but through old audio training cassette tapes, in which he drops some important lore monologues about spring-lock suits and how dangerous they are. I always loved that it was pretty much just Scott Cawthon talking without doing a real character voice. I mean, I remember the first time I heard Scott speak in Daco's interview, I was like, The first real mention of Phone Guy that I found was in MatPat's second FNAF theory video, when he's talking about the timeline of FNAF 2 versus 1, you know, when we were still trying to figure out if it was a prequel or a sequel. He says, "The Phone Guy." From that point on, the community just kept using that placeholder name until eventually it just became the name of the character. In Ultimate Custom Night, Scott literally names his character Phone Guy. Phone Guy, however, does have a more canon name that we know now, thanks to one of the more recent FNAF books called The Week Before. This is an interactive novel following the Phone Guy a week before the first game is supposed to take place. Now, we not only learn that other employees at Fazbear Entertainment also know him as the Phone Guy, because he's notorious for leaving voicemails, but we also learn that his real name is Ralph. Now, I still call him Phone Guy when referring to him in lore discussions, as the name Ralph hasn't fully stuck with me like Phone Guy has, but it is nice to finally have a name to the face. I mean, voice.
GPS satellites, unmanned drones, fucking laser sights. The more crutches you have,
Hi.
the more it hurts when they're kicked out from under you. If there's one thing I know for sure,
Hello.
Moving on to FNAF 2, we have Balloon Boy. This character is a human-like child animatronic that carries balloons and is a boy. He comes at you like any other animatronic in the game, but instead of jump scaring you, he just sits in your office and takes your batteries, basically making your flashlight useless for the rest of the night. Now, this guy is a bit different from the rest of the characters on this list, as we didn't technically come up with this name. In the game files, he is referred to as BB, which, okay, yeah, that most likely stands for Balloon Boy. But Markiplier in his playthrough of FNAF 2 calls him Balloon Boy before knowing that his name is BB. I mean, yes, it's a pretty obvious name for this character given what he looks like. But I always wondered if Scott originally knew the full name of Balloon Boy before or after the fanbase started calling him Balloon Boy. It's very likely that Markiplier just got lucky with the guess. There is also a Balloon Girl character named JJ in the files, and she shows up in a rare Easter egg appearing under your desk. Now, the reason I put Balloon Boy on this list is because if Scott originally intended BB to stand for Balloon Boy, then what the hell does JJ stand for? Jaloon Jurl? Jolly Joyce? Is she just meant to be JJ? And if that's the case, was Balloon Boy always meant to just be BB, and it's a coincidence that Balloon Boy abbreviated is also BB? You get my point. The fact that it's confusing at all is the reason that it's on my list. It's also worth mentioning that the first time Balloon Boy's full name is mentioned in a FNAF game is in the FNAF 4 Halloween edition. In the extras menu, his name is Nightmare Balloon Boy, but in FNAF 2, he's just BB, and in FNAF 3, he's just Phantom BB, and when it's referring to his minigame, it's also just BB's Air Adventure. So we take like 15 or 20% credit for his name, I'd say. Both Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie make their first appearance in FNAF 2, but they do show up later in FNAF 3 as well. Shadow Bonnie appears randomly in your office and fades away very quickly, similar to Golden Freddy. Shadow Freddy shows up in Cam 08, or Parts in Service. Shadow Bonnie has a 1 in a million chance of appearing anytime you lower your camera, and Shadow Freddy is only a 1 in 1,000 chance if Cam 8 is empty. The file name for Shadow Bonnie is originally RWQFSFASXC. I don't really know what Scott's intentions with this name and character were, but Shadow Bonnie is certainly easier to say than, Shadow Freddy doesn't actually show up as a named character in the files, but in FNAF 3, his file name is Crumpled Freddy Suit, referring to the Easter egg you get where Shadow Freddy shows up in the left side of your office. Michael! It's pretty obvious why they got their names as dark silhouettes of their normal counterparts, but for the rest of the series, they were mostly referred to by the community and Scott as the Shadow Animatronics. In FNAF World, Shadow Freddy is literally just called Shadow Freddy, but Shadow Bonnie is still RWQFSFAXC. So even though the fanbase mostly refers to Shadow Bonnie as Shadow Bonnie, Scott keeps pushing this long string of characters for some reason. Maybe it's relevant to the lore, maybe he thinks it sounds cool, but I guess it is more creative than Shadow Bonnie. It is at least cool that Shadow Freddy stuck with that name because while these games were coming out, it was fun to have placeholder names for characters that were obviously connected to the lore in some way. In FNAF 3, through minigames in between nights, we see Shadow Freddy luring animatronics into the back room. I mean, at first we didn't know who or what this purple Freddy was, and to be honest, we still don't have an exact answer. It seems lore-wise that Shadow Bonnie is a bit more important than Shadow Freddy, as he shows up not only in FNAF 3 as one of the minigame characters and a hidden figurine on your desk, but he also was this weird antagonist in the FNAF AR game. I'm not sure where these characters are headed in the future of the franchise, but regardless, I think we can take some credit for their official names.
I'm sorry, man. That was a weird-ass sneeze I just did right there. God damn it!
The Crying Child, or CC, or Bite Victim, is next on our list. The Crying Child's first appearance was in FNAF 4 as our semi-protagonist, as we see his story unfold through minigames that appear at the end of each night, similar to FNAF 3. Now, for a very long time, the only name we had for this character was that he was an Afton of some kind. But even before Sister Location came out and revealed the Afton family name was canon to the games, we just knew him as the Crying Child, and also sometimes Bite Victim, depending on how you were referring to him in lore discussions. You can, take a guess as to how we got these names. I mean, he's crying, and he's a child. Are you sensing a pattern here? As for the name Bite Victim, he gets his head chomped by Fredbear in one of the last FNAF 4 minigame cutscenes, so yeah, I mean, he's a victim of a bite for sure. The Crying Child is one of the most confusing characters lore-wise in the games. He doesn't show up in any other games necessarily, but it is believed that he is one of, or the only spirit possessing Golden Freddy or Fredbear. The FNAF books tell us a lot of information that we think is supposed to help figure him out, but there's nothing really concrete in the games about his identity and role in the rest of the franchise. As for his canonical name, some people for a long time believed it was Cassidy, thanks to an insanely complicated word search from the FNAF survival logbook. That's this guy here. That eventually was agreed to be a different spirit, and I believe the most recent canonical name that we think to be correct is Evan. Huge thanks to Reddit user Wolfie1740 Kingdom, who discovered it in the same logbook using answers to questions we believe the Crying Child was responding with. Basically, this person had to go back and forth, attaching corresponding page numbers to question answers we believe the Crying Child was giving to some other spirit that might be Cassidy. It's confusing, as is everything in this franchise, but alas, we have the name Evan Afton. Now, I honestly don't know if this is the final agreed upon name. I think a lot of people will simply just refer to the Crying Child as such, or Bite Victim, but regardless, Scott seems to like the name Crying Child as well, even naming the character officially Crying Child in FNAF World. Now, this character in FNAF World also looks a bit more like crying children that appear in the FNAF 3 minigames, but it's mostly agreed upon that it is the Crying Child from FNAF 4. Moving on.
What the hell? Purple guy!
Perhaps one of the most iconic character names in the franchise, we have Purple Guy. Purple Guy makes his debut in FNAF 2 through a series of 8-bit cutscenes in which we see him doing some pretty evil things. It's pretty cool because FNAF 2 is the first time we actually start to see lore bleed into the games more than just Easter eggs, as we later see that this 8-bit style cutscene/minigame is Scott's primary way of storytelling. Purple Guy's first name drop was in Markiplier's FNAF 2 Let's Play, specifically his Part 4, when he plays the Foxy Go 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 minigame. In this minigame, you play as Foxy running to children over and over for like a surprise birthday party or something, but when Purple Guy shows up, it's already too late. Markiplier straight up just says,
Hello, Purple guy!
And from that point on, that's just his name. This mysterious figure is only known by his color and that he's just a guy. Again, never intentionally meant to be his name, but it just stuck. There was also a while where the internet was calling him Vincent. An artist named Rebornica made a FNAF comic that featured the Purple Guy, and his name in the comic was Vincent Bishop. This name stuck to a lot of people, as the comic artist design for Purple Guy was pretty memorable. But once the name William Afton was revealed in the first book, The Silver Eyes, people had trouble letting the name Vincent go. But once it was confirmed in Sister Location that the name Afton was also canon in the game universe,
Mr. Afton.
Purple Guy officially had an even more iconic name, William Afton. Eventually people stopped using Vincent, as I really don't hear that name floating around anymore. And even though nobody really calls Purple Guy anymore, since William Afton has been the big bad for quite some time now, the Purple Guy is technically still a canon name for the sprite. As in FNAF World, Scott also uses this sprite and name officially, similar to Crying Child. And that about concludes my list here today. As I previously mentioned, a lot of these characters were just meant to be placeholder names as we didn't have any other information about them besides vague descriptions of their appearance. But as time went on, people got so familiar with the names that they just stuck. And I always found it even cooler that Scott ended up keeping some of the names out of respect and love for fans of the series. Even in instances where Scott wrote the canon or intentional name for the character later, he still acknowledged their names given by the community. And I think that says a lot about Scott's relationship with the fandom and how he cares about the community's input. While I do make jokes about these names being uncreative or obvious, realistically they are some of the most unique names in the franchise. being able to have a basic name that is essentially just a description of a character while also knowing exactly who and what we are talking about is a pretty cool thing in my opinion. If I left any characters off this list that fit the criteria, please feel free to let me know in the comments. Anyways, thanks for watching, please consider subscribing for more FNAF and horror related content, and I will yap at you in the next one. Alright, bye bye, take care, thank you.